Hello there folks, back again for another video. In this one we're going to be diving deeper into what Games Workshop have got planned for the Middle-earth strategy battle game and the new edition of said game. I mentioned earlier in the week, if you've not watched it, that Games Workshop are going to be doing a second article looking at the new rules and how things have changed. If you want to go and watch that, it will be linked at the end, so you can go and check out the profiles and special rules video that they did. Well, I did, about the rules, and you can learn a little bit more about what they've got planned for characters and warriors and everything else in between. But this particular article looks at how army building has changed in the new edition, and it has changed somewhat drastically. So rather than it being a sort of open Lothlorien, Gondor, etc. style affair, they have sort of broken it down into armies and collections of characters that would make sense in the course of the film and I suppose in the book on the tabletop, and how that kind of pans out. So everything that they've designed here is essentially in a way to represent alliances, battles and fellowships that would have been together at particular points of the story of the War of the Ring, of the War of the Rohirrim, and of course during the era of the Hobbit as well. And so that means Last Alliance armies that feel like the Last Alliance. The same goes for the Fellowship, or the Reclamation of Moria, or the Battle of Amal Hen, and all that kind of thing. All the armies are slightly more focused around the idea of legendary legions, as they were in the last edition of the game, which became a very popular way for you to build armies anyway. And so you have certain restrictions, but also certain freedoms and certain special rules that come from building armies to create thematic units and stuff on the tabletop. So yes, they've tried to make it so that it's a lot easier for you to dive in and build interesting armies that feel like they fit the themes of Middle-earth, rather than, as they say here, just a army that has tacked on Gwaihir, Aragorn or the Witch King just to cover a weakness. I always tended to approach building armies from a sort of perspective of theme anyway, so this isn't necessarily a massive change for me. I suppose in some ways this might end up being slightly more restrictive for people, but the points for all individual warriors and stuff will all be still available as part of their profiles. So if you wanted to build something entirely different and step away from the army building matrix as it is now for Middle-earth strategy battle game, I don't see anything necessarily stopping you. The only thing that would change here is that it might be slightly more unbalanced, and if you're going to be playing against people in a tournament, I would assume that Games Workshop would want you to try and build to their style of army building, and I would assume the same would go for community tournaments as well, although they can of course make their own rules and build things in their own way. So let's just dive in and have a look at how it all comes together. So as they mentioned, the armies of the Lord of the Rings and the armies of the Hobbit will feature all of the characters from both of those trilogies, as well as the War of the Rohirrim, which will be found inside the armies of the Lord of the Rings. And then from there, they have started to build up some interesting army lists, and you can see one of them popping into view here. Now, one thing that I think is quite important is this bit here. So each list states which profiles can be taken, what war gear those models can or must take. Not every war gear option for a profile can be taken in every list they feature in, and which heroic tier the heroes are when taken in that army list. So Boromir just doesn't inherently become a hero of legend. He may be in the Reclamation of Osgiliath, but then he might not necessarily be as part of the Fellowship or whatever, if you wanted to go down that route. Same for Faramir and all that kind of thing. Maybe Hero of Valor as part of Reclamation of Osgiliath. Maybe Hero of Legend as part of something further down the line. Who would have thought it? I suppose we'll see as things get developed as they go forward. But as you can see, they have kind of broken it down into Heroes of Legend, Heroes of Valor, Fortitude, and then a list of warriors as well as the additional rules that come with that faction. So let's dive into the Reclamation of Osgiliath and see how that pans out. So let's zoom in. So the hero of legend for this is Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, so that will be the profile you'll use. He must be the army general when you build Reclamation of Osgiliath, which makes sense. He can be given the banner of Minas Tirith, a horse and a shield. No bow for Boromir, why would he need one of those? And as long as you take the shield, he'll be safe from bows. Forgot that, didn't you? You've also got the Hero of Valor there, which is Faramir, Captain of Gondor, which is 100 points, Madril, and also the Captain of Minas Tirith as your basic character. And I would assume although things may change, that heroes of legend, valor, and fortitude can have warbands of differing sizes based on their rank. You then have warriors. You've got the warriors of Minas Tirith, who can take the war horn and shield, banner, shield and spear, bow and shield. And of course, as we looked at in the profile earlier in the week, they will have to make one of those choices when building the unit. You also have the Knights of Minas Tirith, who can change their lance and shield for a banner. And there is also the Rangers of Gondor, who can have the banner, the warhorn, and the spear. I would assume that inherently their profile comes with both a hand weapon and bow. And then you have the Osgiliath veterans, who can choose between a bow, a shield, and a spear. And again, their points are fairly similar to what we've kind of seen in the past. So warband building won't necessarily be a different kettle of fish when it comes to the maths element of it. But then, similar to the Legendary Legions of the last edition, we then have a series of special rules. So for this particular army, the army of Osgiliath, you have "Remember today, little brother. The sons of Denethor have fought alongside one another since childhood, and can easily anticipate the other's movements on the battlefield. While Boromir and Faramir are within 3 inches of each other, they may spend each other's might, will, and fate as if it were their own." Very cool special rule, that. "This city was once the jewel of our kingdom." Friendly models will gain the Mountain Dweller special rule, which will be for hopping along difficult terrain. And then you've also got For Gondor. Once per game at the start of any fight phase, Boromir can use this special rule as long as he is alive and on the battlefield. If he does, then friendly Gondor warrior models within 6 inches of Boromir will gain a bonus of +1 to wound when making strikes until the end of the turn. This is treated as an active ability belonging to Boromir. Belonging to Boromir. So you can activate that once per game, which is pretty cool and very strong. And another interesting way for you to build your armies and obviously get the benefit of that. Thematic list makes use of miniatures that are freely available that would fit the period, if you know what I mean. You're not going to be throwing in the Knights of Dol Amroth or anything like that into this. And rather than building up from just a base Minas Tirith list and then tacking on stuff, you're kind of approaching this from the viewpoint of these are the limitations, but also the benefits that I get out of that. So I actually quite like the look of this. I think it's a really nice way of building thematic forces. It may change up people's army lists for those who kind of go very broad. Maybe someone who just picks a particular unit type, for example, or just goes, I'm going to do trolls. Maybe that won't necessarily be as viable. Maybe under Mordor, I suppose we'll see. See how those rules shake out. But it'll be interesting to see what it's like for people who go slightly broader. But I quite like the sort of more focused idea of building the armies. And again, it's a nice way of building on the feel of the Legendary Legions from the last edition of the game. So yes, that was the Reclamation of Osgiliath list there. And as you can see, done with the idea of it matching the theme. So it revolves around the scene where we see Boromir having reclaimed the city of Osgiliath and holding the banner of the White Tower aloft, fighting side by side against Faramir. And again, it's really got that kind of cool, passionate side to it, sort of really nailing the theme on with Remember Today, little brother. So you can make Boromir and Faramir this really awesome fighting pair. I actually have miniatures for Boromir from in his armor and stuff from that period, and also of course I've got Faramir from the new set, from the Osgiliath set anyway, from last edition. So it'd be fun to bring those together and build up a fun Osgiliath force. I even have some veterans somewhere, so I'll be able to build a fun 400 to 600 point army probably out of those. I mean, Boromir himself is 160 and Faramir is 100, so that's already 260 points done and dusted. Next, we have a slightly more broader force, so I think this kind of answers some of those questions. So this is the Legions of Mordor. Let's dive into this one. So the Witch King of Angmar is your hero of legend of here, and here's the set bonuses here. So 3 attacks, 3 might, 18 will, 3 fate, with the Crown of Morgul and the Armoured Felbis. So that's kind of giving you what he must use, alongside the options for the Morgul Blade and the two-handed weapon. Heroes of Valor are the Ring Race, and again, there's a set use of options there, and they must ride the Fell Beasts alongside Gothmog and the Mumuk War Leader. And then your Heroes of Fortitude are Guritz, the Master of Reserves, Gothmog's Enforcer, the Morannon Orc Captain, the Haradrim Chieftain, and the War Mumuk of Harad, alongside the Easterling Captain there as well, so they're not going anywhere. And then amongst that, you then have a section of options, so you can go with Morannon Orc Warriors, the Mordor Troll, with the War Drum option, the Mordor War Catapult, the Haradrim Warriors, and the Easterling Warriors. So a fairly broad brush stroke of affair when it comes to the Legions of Mordor marching on Minas Tirith during the Pelennor. So a nice little set there. As you can see, yes, and the Battle of Pelennor Fields, which is the reference effectively for where they want to go with that one. And obviously, there you go. So, of course, there are plenty of armies that represent individual aspects of these scenes. So players want to hone it can also go for things as the Army of Gothmog and Harad as an individual force. So they have actually got more specific forces, a bit like the Reclamation of Osgiliath, in there as well. Additional rules. So the Mordor warrior models can only be included in the warband of a Mordor hero. Harad warriors can only be included in the warband of a Harad hero. And Easterling warriors can only be included in the warband of an Easterling hero. So if you want to have a mix of things, you have to have different characters, which is nice to see. And then the special rule, there's just one big one for this one, is bring the city to its knees. Friendly models may re-roll to wound rolls of a natural 1 when making strikes against an enemy hero model. So very nice if you're trying to combat the forces of Rohan on the tabletop and bring down Theoden and Eomer and the like, and Eowyn. Very nice indeed. And then we have another one here which they previewed, which is called Ride Out. And this is to represent the charge from the gates of Helm's Deep with Theoden, Aragorn, and the rest of the allies as they make a desperate bid to crush the forces of Saruman before Gandalf arrives. And here's a look at this one. So we've got the hero of legend choice is Theoden, and he comes automatically with the heavy armor, shield, and snowmane. You've got Aragorn as Strider there with armor and Brago, and then Legolas with the armor and horse and the elven cloak. No Gimli, of course, because Gimli's up top blowing the horn. And then here's the Fortitude Gamling, the captain of Rohan with horse and can choose the royal standard. And then there's also the captain of Rohan with horse who can exchange for heavy armor and get a shield. And then you have the option for riders of Rohan with banners and spears as options, and the Rohan Royal Guard on horse as well, with throwing spears. The rider army must always contain Theoden, and they become the army's general, and the riders of Rohan do not count towards the army's bow limit, which is a carryover from classic Rohan army building of the last edition. And then we have a couple of special rules here as well. So now for Wrath, now for Ruin and the Red Dawn. When a friendly cavalry model moves, it must charge if able. Additionally, on a turn in which a friendly cavalry model charges, they gain a bonus of +1 to their strength, and they may re-roll any ones during a dual roll that turn. Very nice. The Horn of Helm Hammond should stand in the deep one last time. Once per game at the start of any move phase, you can declare you are using this special rule. Until the end of the turn, friendly cavalry models gain the Terror special rule. Very nice. And also, for Death and Glory, all friendly models gain Fearless as a special rule, so a really nice bonus there on that front as well. We're going to have to see a lot of reissued models to help make these nice and easy to build as armies, but that is only a good thing. Really nice stuff there again, a very thematic force. Very obviously heavy on the idea of cavalry alongside the different heroes. So a very fast-moving force. I would be interested to see if there's one for like the Defenders of Helm Deep, where it's them on the walls alongside the High Elves, not the High Elves, but the Wood Elves of Haldir, the Wood Elves of Lothlorien, and then also throwing in lots of other bits and pieces there as well. Will be really fun to see when they start to create different armies for that particular period. Like I know they've talked about one that is about the Road to Helm's Deep. That's the one. So the Road to Helm's Deep will give players the chance to build a mounted force of those attacked on the road by Saruman's Warg Riders. So, and Legolas and Gimli can even share a horse. So that would be one where you'd have Theoden, but he wouldn't necessarily have his armor on because he's lightly armored in that particular scene. So that would be a difference in his points costs and stuff based on what you were doing with that one. But yes, they've also got plenty of other plans. You can see there's one for the Minas Morgul, focusing on the dread army contained in the Dead City, where the orcs benefit from the Blades of the Dead. Besiegers of the Hornburg allows you to muster Wolf's army that assailed the Hornburg and can be accompanied by a snow troll. The Assault on Ravenhill, which is all of the heroes that attacked Azog, to cut the head from the snake. And as I said, the Road to Helm's Deep, which contains Legolas and Gimli on horseback alongside the likes of Saruman's Warg Riders. And there's also one just for the 3 trolls, which allows players to purchase upgrades to improve Bilbert and Tom to field them above 400 points. So if you wanted to make a much larger point army based on just 3 trolls, you can actually do that as a viable strategy, which I think is a really interesting way of doing things. As I said, there are simply loads of options in the new edition. We'll see that in the actual books when we get them. And they've gone to great lengths to ensure that if it's on screen, that you can do it in the battle game. Between the armies of the Lord of the Rings and the armies of the Hobbit, there are 68 army lists, with more coming in Armies of Middle-earth, which will land later on as an additional book. We cannot wait for people to dive into the new army lists and discover all the new evocative and thematic rules. I think the idea of doing the Legendary Legions is a solid option. It makes things much easier for newcomers who want to dive into the game. I think it's a really nice way of creating stuff that looks epic on the tabletop and kind of mirrors the films and by extension the books as well. Does it remove a bit of freedom? Yes. Am I particularly bothered about that? Not really. I suppose we'll see when we actually get the books whether or not I am necessarily bothered by it. But as a starting point, I don't think this is a massive issue for army building, and I'm eager to see what people will make out of this when they get it to the tabletop and have some fun with it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you like the sound of the new army building rules? Do you think it's restrictive? Do you think it's going to be just a lot of fun? Do you sit somewhere in the middle? Are you going to reserve your judgment until you know more? Let me know what you think, and yeah, we'll dive into the comments and have a discussion on it, because that's the most important thing. So yeah, I love exploring what you guys are talking about and getting involved in the conversation. It's always fascinating to see what people's opinions are on particular topics. So yes, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will dive back into the comments with you very, very soon, and there'll be another video on the weekend. So watch out for that. Bye for now.